Earlier today, President Trump made changes to U.S. policy toward Cuba that were put in place by the Obama administration. He was joined in Miami by Vice President Mike Pence and officials from Florida, Senator Marco Rubio, Governor Rick Scott, and Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, who was the first to speak. This is a little more than an hour.
Thank you so very much. Buenos días. Let me tell you, this is a special day to be with the distinguished members of the President's Cabinet, including our very own Secretary Acosta, my colleagues. I know there are some of my colleagues that are here, and of course, starting with Senator Rubio, Congressman Curbelo. I know I'm going to miss some, but I know that someone that's very special to me, Congressman Lincoln Diaz-Balart, is here, along with who along with Ileana Ros-Lehtinen and Senator Menendez were the ones who codified U.S. law against the tyranny in Cuba. And of course, our Governor Scott is here. Heroes like Cali Roque and Angel de la Fana and Jorge Luis Garcia Perez Antunes are here. My friends, today I stand here in the presence of so many heroes, former political prisoners, the heroes of the Brigada 2506 Brigade, and so many of you. So many others who have suffered under the hands and by the hands of the Castro regime. And let me just talk about the brigade. You know, the brigade is a symbol of dignity, made up of men and women, made up of men who personify sacrifice and heroism, and who, having experienced betrayal, have nevertheless never wavered in the struggle for freedom. Now, many presidents have made commitments, but unfortunately some of those were not kept. When our brave heroes were promised support on April 17th, 1961, they were betrayed and the support never came. When then nominee, Mr. Obama, came to Miami and he promised that he would support the embargo for the leverage that it provided until genuine change and respect for human rights took place in the island, he broke his word. In his last term in office, President Obama urged Congress to end the embargo and yielded all possible concessions, and the Castro regime never unclenched its fist. Now, you know, his policy was based on this absurd notion that increasing trade with the brutal, murderous Castro regime, by the way, even directly aiding the Cuban military tourism industry, would somehow help the Cuban people. He exalted the virtues of his policy, which pretended that the oppressed are somehow helped by the strengthening of their oppressors. In contrast, my dear friends, then nominee Donald Trump, he promised that he would pursue a policy on Cuba that would put U.S. law, the American values of freedom and democracy, and the American national security interests first. But, oh yeah. So here we are. And now he comes back to Miami. In his very first year, his first year as president, to keep his promise. You see, my friends, my dear friends, the commitments that he made to you and to those struggling for freedom just 90 miles away from our shores are being kept. U.S. policy will ensure that the Cuban military, which oppresses the Cuban people and it beats the people through its thugs and imprisons political activists and spies on its neighbors, they can no longer benefit from increased trade and travel. The regime, that same regime that was caught smuggling 240 tons of weapons to North Korea, and which has the blood of innocents on its hand, will no longer benefit from U.S. dollars. If you'll allow me, I have a message for the Cuban people. This is my message to the Cuban people and to all those struggling for freedom. President Trump stands with you. President Trump will not stand for the suppression of basic rights. He will not gloss over human rights abuses and the pleas of political prisoners. You will no longer have to witness the embarrassing spectacle of an American president doing the wave with a ruthless dictator at a baseball game in Cuba. Nope. No. To the Cuban people, the President of the United States stands with you. Muy brevemente, tengo un mensaje para el pueblo cubano y todos los que luchan por la libertad. El presidente Trump está con ustedes. No, presidente Trump no aceptará como normal la supresión de los derechos fundamentales. No pasará por alto los abusos contra los derechos de los cubanos, ni las súplicas de los presos políticos. Ahora, al pueblo cubano, ahora el presidente de los Estados Unidos está con ustedes. Look, I am honored to be here as President Trump sets a new course that is faithful to the values that we cherish and the struggle for freedom, which has come at such a great cost to so many. President Trump will treat the Castro regime as the malevolent dictatorship that it is. Thank you, President Trump, for keeping your commitments. You have not betrayed us. You kept your promise. And you stand in solidarity with the Cuban people and freedom-loving people everywhere. And you are putting American values, the U.S. national security interest, and the freedom of the Cuban people first. Thank you, President Trump.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator Marco Rubio.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. The Sunday after the presidential election, I was at Dadeland Mall. I was in the parking lot of Dadeland Mall, and I called President-elect Trump on his cell phone to congratulate him on his victory. And one of the first things he said to me is, "What are we going to do to help the Cuban people?" A few weeks later, I had the honor of flying with him to Central Florida on Air Force One. And he again, in the midst of that conversation, asked, "What are we going to do to help the Cuban people?" My wife and I had the opportunity to dine with him and the First Lady in the White House. And in the middle of that conversation, he asked, "What are we going to do to help the Cuban people and the people of Venezuela, who are also living under a dictatorship?" Six weeks ago in the Oval Office, the President of the United States, gathered with members of his cabinet, made a very clear decision. We are going to do whatever it takes to empower the Cuban people so that they can be free and live in a democracy and have economic and political liberties that they deserve, like everyone else in this hemisphere deserves. And he has not faltered in that commitment. The cooperation, the hard work, the commitment that this White House and that President Trump has shown to this cause, I believe has no precedent, certainly in the modern history of this great cause. We have been helped by many who have aligned with us, some who could not be here today. I do want to recognize Resident Commissioner Jennifer Gonzalez of Puerto Rico, nuestra hermana de la isla de Puerto Rico que está junto con nosotros, that's who's with us on this issue. But what I want you to know is that in every single one of those instances in which the President spoke about Cuba, he also spoke about Brigade 2506. Because a few weeks before the election, for the first time in decades, he went to visit their museum, where they endorsed him, meaning the first time in decades that they had endorsed a presidential candidate. And there isn't a single time that I have spoken to the President about Cuba that he has not mentioned the brigade. And that strikes me because it reminds us that almost 60 years ago, when they were young men willing to fight and to die for the freedom of their homeland, they made an extraordinary sacrifice. And perhaps some of them felt that the time to make a difference for them had passed. But I want them to know that almost 60 years later, they have made a difference. That meeting and their efforts, I believe, as much as anything else, has brought us to this day. And we just landed at the airport. I had the honor, again, of flying on Air Force One. They have the best M&Ms on the planet. And you can take red lights when you're part of the motorcade that comes in, legally, without those crazy cameras. Never mind, I don't want to talk about that. But get rid of the cameras, yeah. And it struck me as the plane landed and we were getting into the cars that brought us here, and we look at the President coming down the steps, he was greeted by dissidents, by freedom fighters, by people, some of whom on the island of Cuba have suffered greatly in the hands of this repressive regime. And less than a year and a half ago, an American president landed in Havana, greeted by a regime. A year and a half ago, an American president, landed in Havana to outstretch his hand to a regime. Today, a new president lands in Miami to reach out his hand to the people of Cuba. And I close with this. I close with this. Many will characterize this as an effort to punish the Cuban regime. And it will punish the Cuban military that oppresses its people and helps Maduro oppress their people in Venezuela. But more than anything else, this change empowers the people of Cuba. Not the government, not the regime, but the people, so that they can enjoy the freedom and the liberty. With a very clear message: America is prepared to outstretch its hand and work with the people of Cuba, but we will not empower their oppressors. And you mark my words. And you mark my words. Whether it's in 6 months or 6 years, Cuba will be free. And when it is, I believe that the people on the island and history will say that perhaps the key moment in that transition began on this day, here in this theater, with each of you, and with a president that was willing to do what needed to be done so that freedom and liberty returns to the enslaved island of Cuba. Voy a ser bien breve, que es muy difícil para un cubano y para un senador ser breve, pero lo voy a hacer, porque quiero mandarle un mensaje al pueblo de Cuba. Y este es el mensaje: que antes teníamos un presidente que le daba la mano al régimen que lo oprime, pero ahora tenemos un presidente americano que le da la mano a ustedes, el pueblo cubano. Que los días en cual la política exterior de este país ayuda al régimen se están terminando, y los días en que la política norteamericana ayuda al pueblo cubano para que ellos puedan tener la libertad, la democracia y los derechos que se merecen, que Dios les ha dado. Y cuando ese día llegue, que Cuba será libre por fin, yo le aseguro que este día que estamos aquí hoy, la historia va a decir que es el principio del fin de este régimen. Gracias a un presidente llamado Donald Trump, que hizo lo que tenía que hacer para que la democracia y la libertad regrese a la isla de Cuba. Muchísimas gracias. God bless you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Governor of Florida, Rick Scott.
First, it is great to be here with President Trump, Vice President Pence, and all of you. And it's great they're in the great state of Florida. As the governor of this great state, I've been honored to meet with so many Cuban Americans and hear their stories of hope that one day the island nation will be free. When Fidel Castro died, I was hopeful for an end to the decades of torture, repression, and incarceration that the Castro brothers have subjected on the Cuban people for too long. Unfortunately, nothing has changed, and actually has gotten worse. The Castro regime continues to imprison people who speak out against the brutality. There's still no freedom of the press or religion, or free and fair elections. We can all go on and on about the abuses of the Castro regime. But there are so many who refuse to let the Castro regime get away with their heinous acts. and Túnez. Gary Roquet. Angel de Pana. Shirley Villa-León. And Pedro Corzo. These individuals are just a few of those who have fought against the Castro regime over the past decades. They've been imprisoned, tortured, and publicly shamed by the Castro regime, yet they still and others refuse to back down. I've had the distinct opportunity to honor them with Freedom Awards for their fight for a free Cuba, and we should all be proud of their heroic efforts. Right after President Trump was elected, I started meeting with him, along with others, Senator Rubio, Mario Diaz-Balart, and others, to discuss how important it is that America stand up for the Cuban people, that America stands for freedom. The deal President Obama made with Cuba was simply a capitulation and an acceptance of tyranny. President Trump will stand for freedom. America must always stand for freedom. Whether it's popular or not, America must stand for freedom. Whether it's easy or not, America must stand for freedom. Whether it's profitable or not, America must stand for freedom. Today, we have a president and a vice president who understand that America will always stand for freedom. El pueblo de Cuba se merece libertad. Muchas gracias. Now, I have a distinct opportunity to introduce somebody that's been a friend for a long time, that is a tireless advocate for freedom in this world, Vice President Mike Pence.
Hello, Miami! What a great day. Governor Scott, Senator Rubio, Congressman Diaz-Balart, Congressman Cabello, Secretary Acosta, Secretary Perdue, Secretary Ross, distinguished members of the Cuban American community, honored guests, my fellow Americans, welcome to history. Welcome to a historic day, a day when America will renew our commitment to the ideal of freedom in this hemisphere, a day when the world will witness America once again standing in solidarity with the people of Cuba thanks to the strong and unwavering leadership of President Donald Trump. It is the greatest privilege of my life to serve as Vice President to President Donald Trump. A man of his word, a man of action, and a president who stands without apology as leader of the free world. Since the hour of our nation's birth, the United States has stood for the proposition that all are created equal, that we're endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. As Americans, we believe these rights belong to the entire human family. But for 58 years, the people of Cuba have labored under a repressive regime that has stifled their liberty, and with it, their future. For generations, the sons and daughters of Cuba have come to our shores in search of the freedom that their friends and family at home are denied. But while you came to the land of the free, you never forgot home. You raised your voices through the generations to demand that Cuba be free once more. And once again, you have a president who hears you and is with you. Today, President Donald Trump will make it clear that America is with you, that America stands with the persecuted, the oppressed, and the exploited in Cuba. That this nation stands not with tyrants, but today, President Donald Trump will make it clear that the United States of America stands with the courageous men and women of Cuba who seek to reclaim their God-given rights to life and liberty. Today, under the leadership of President Donald Trump, America will say once again with one voice, Que viva Cuba libre. Cuba sí, Castro no. So with gratitude for his leadership and with admiration for his unwavering dedication to freedom, it is now my high honor and distinct privilege to introduce to you my friend, the President of the United States of America, President Donald Trump.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much. Great honor, and thank you to my truly great friend, Vice President Mike Pence. He's terrific. And thank you to Miami. We love Miami. Let me start by saying that I'm glad Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and I, along with a very talented team, were able to get Otto Warmbier back with his parents. What's happened to him is a truly terrible thing, but at least the ones who love him so much can now take care of him and be with him. Also, my dear friend, Steve Scalise, took a bullet for all of us. And because of him and the tremendous pain and suffering he's now enduring, and he's having a hard time, far worse than anybody thought, our country will perhaps become closer, more unified, so important. So we all owe Steve a big, big thank you. And let's keep the Warmbier family and the Scalise family and all of the victims of the congressional shooting in our hearts and prayers. And it was quite a day, and our police officers were incredible, weren't they? They did a great job. Good job. And let us all pray for a future of peace, unity, and safety for all of our people. Thank you. And for Cuba. I am so thrilled to be back here with all of my friends in Little Havana. I love it. I love this city. And one of the big thank you. Thank you. Now, this is an amazing community. The Cuban American community. There's so much love. I saw that immediately. Thank you, darling. Oh, do I love you too. What you've built here, a vibrant culture, a thriving neighborhood, the spirit of adventure, is a testament to what a free Cuba could be. And with God's help, a free Cuba is what we will soon achieve. And I don't even mind that it's 110 degrees up here. This room is packed. You know, it wasn't designed for this. I'd like to thank the fire department. We are delighted to be joined by so many friends and leaders of our great community. I want to express our deep gratitude to a man that's really become a friend of mine. And I want to tell you, he is one tough competitor, Senator Marco Rubio. Great guy. He is tough, man. He is tough, and he's good, and he loves you. He loves you. And I listened to another friend of mine, Congressman Mario Diaz-Balart, and I'll tell you, I loved what he said, and I appreciated, Mario, I appreciated what you said so much. fact, I was looking for Mario. I wanted to find him. They said he was on stage. I almost dragged him off the stage to thank him, but now I'm thanking you anyway. Thank you, Mario. That was great. Really appreciate it. And I also want to thank my good friend and just a man who was of tremendous support in the state of Florida for being with us, Governor Rick Scott. Great job. He's doing a great job. Oh, I hope he runs for the Senate. I know I'm not supposed to say that. I hope he runs for the Senate. Rick, are you running? Huh? I don't know. Marco, let's go. Come on, we got to get him to... I hope he runs for the Senate. We're deeply honored to be joined by amazing veterans of the Bay of Pigs. These are great people, amazing people. I have wonderful memories from our visit during the campaign. That was some visit. I was right before the election. I guess it worked, right? Boy, Florida as a whole and this community that supported us like by tremendous margins, and we appreciate it. But including one of the big honors, and that was the honor of getting the Bay of Pigs Award just before the election. And it's great to be gathered in a place named for a true hero of the Cuban people, and you know what that means. I was also looking forward to welcoming today two people who are not present. Jose Daniel Ferrer and Berta Soler were both prevented from leaving Cuba for this event. So we acknowledge them. They're great friends, great help. And although they could not be with us, we are with them 100%, okay? We are with them, right? Finally, I want to recognize everyone in the audience who has their own painful but important story to tell about the true and brutal nature of the Castro regime. Brutal. We thank the dissidents, the exiles, and the children of Operation Peter Pan. You know what that means. And all who gather in the cafes, churches, and the streets of this incredible area and city to speak the truth and to stand for justice. And we want to thank you all for being a voice for the voiceless. There are people, it's voiceless, but you are making up the difference, and we all want to thank you. This group is amazing, just an incredible, you are an incredible group of talented, passionate people. Thank you. Incredible group of people. Many of you witnessed terrible crimes committed in service of a depraved ideology. You saw the dreams of generations held by captive. And just literally, you look at what happened and what communism has done. You knew faces that disappeared, innocents locked in prisons, and believers persecuted for preaching the word of God. You watched the women in white, bruised, bloodied, and captured on their way from Mass. You have heard the chilling cries of loved ones or the cracks of firing squads piercing through the ocean breeze. Not a good sound. Among the courageous Cuban dissidents with us on stage here today are Carrie Roque, who was imprisoned by the Castro regime 15 years ago. She looks awfully good.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Vice President. Thank you, Marco Rubio, Mario Diaz-Balart. Thank you to all the men and the Cubans who fight, no matter what the times can be, for the Cuban liberty. On behalf, Mr. President, on behalf of the Cuban people, the people inside my eyes, my homeland, thank you. Thank you, and we appreciate your love.
Thank you. Wow. That's pretty good. She didn't know she was going to do that either, I will tell you. Thank you very much. Antunes, imprisoned for 17 years. Where is he? I love that name. Antunes, I love that name. And Angel Difana, imprisoned for over 20 years. Thank you. Thank you. Very brave people. The exiles and dissidents here today have witnessed communism destroy a nation, just as communism has destroyed every single nation where it has ever been tried. But we will not be silent in the face of communist oppression any longer. You have seen the truth, you have spoken the truth, and the truth has now called us, this group, called us to action. Thank you. Last year, I promised to be a voice against repression. In our region, remember, tremendous repression, and a voice for the freedom of the Cuban people. You heard that pledge. You exercised the right you have to vote. You went out and you voted, and here I am, like I promised, like I promised. I promise you, I keep my promises. Sometimes in politics, they take a little bit longer, but we get there. We get there. Don't we get there? You better believe it, Mike. We get there. Thank you. Thank you. No, we keep our promise. And now that I am your president, America will expose the crimes of the Castro regime and stand with the Cuban people in their struggle for freedom. Because we know it is best for America to have freedom in our hemisphere, whether in Cuba or Venezuela, and to have a future where the people of each country can live out their own dreams. For nearly 6 decades, the Cuban people have suffered under communist domination. To this day, Cuba is ruled by the same people who killed tens of thousands of their own citizens, who sought to spread their repressive and failed ideology throughout our hemisphere, and who once tried to host enemy nuclear weapons 90 miles from our shores. The Castro regime has shipped arms to North Korea and fueled chaos in Venezuela. While imprisoning innocents, it has harbored cop killers, hijackers, and terrorists. It has supported human trafficking, forced labor, and exploitation all around the globe. This is the simple truth of the Castro regime. My administration will not hide from it, excuse it, or glamorize it. And we will never, ever be blind to it. We know what's going on, and we remember what happened. On my recent trip overseas, I said the United States is adopting a principled realism rooted in our values, shared interests, and common sense. I also said countries should take greater responsibility for creating stability in their own regions. It's hard to think of a policy that makes less sense than the prior administration's terrible and misguided deal with the Castro regime. Well, you have to say the Iran deal was pretty bad also, at all fairness. Let's not forget that beauty. They made a deal with a government that spreads violence and instability in the region, and nothing they got. Think of it, nothing they got. They fought for everything, and we just didn't fight hard enough. But now, those days are over. Now we hold the cards. We now hold the cards. The previous administration's easing of restrictions on travel and trade does not help the Cuban people. They only enrich the Cuban regime. The profits from investment and tourism flow directly to the military. The regime takes the money and owns the industry. The outcome of last administration's executive action has been only more repression and a move to crush the peaceful democratic movement. Therefore, effective immediately, I am canceling the last administration's completely one-sided deal with Cuba. I am announcing today a new policy, just as I promised during the campaign, and I will be signing that contract right at that table in just a moment. Our policy will seek a much better deal for the Cuban people and for the United States of America. We do not want U.S. dollars to prop up a military monopoly that exploits and abuses the citizens of Cuba. Our new policy begins with strictly enforcing U.S. law. We will not lift sanctions on the Cuban regime until all political prisoners are freed. Freedoms of assembly and expression are respected. All political parties are legalized. and free and internationally supervised elections are scheduled. Elections. We will very strongly restrict American dollars flowing to the military, security, and intelligence services that are the core of the Castro regime. They will be restricted. We will enforce the ban on tourism. We will enforce the embargo. We will take concrete steps to ensure that investments flow directly to the people so they can open private businesses and begin to build their country's great, great future, a country of great potential. My action today bypasses the military and the government to help the Cuban people themselves form businesses and pursue much better lives. We will keep in place the safeguards to prevent Cubans from risking their lives to unlawful travel to the United States. They are in such danger the way they have to come to this country, and we are going to be safeguarding those people. We have to. We have no choice. We have to. And we will work for the day when a new generation of leaders brings this long reign of suffering to an end. And I do believe that end is in the very near future. We challenge Cuba to come to the table with a new agreement that is in the best interests of both their people and our people, and also of Cuban Americans. To the Cuban government, I say, put an end to the abuse of dissidents. Release the political prisoners. Stop jailing innocent people. Open yourselves to political and economic freedoms. Return the fugitives from American justice, including the return of the cop killer, Joanne Chesimard. And finally, hand over the Cuban military criminals who shot down and killed 4 brave members of Brothers to the Rescue, who were in unarmed, small, slow, civilian planes. Those victims included Mario de la Pena Jr. and Carlos Costa. We are honored to be joined today by Mario's parents, Miriam and Mario, and Carlos's sister, Mirta. Where are you? Those are great, great parents who love their children so much. What they've done is just an incredible, incredible thing. What they represent, they did not die in vain. What they represent to everybody, and especially to the Cuban people. So your children did not die in vain, believe me. So to the Castro regime, I repeat, the harboring of criminals and fugitives will end You have no choice. It will end. Any changes to the relationship between the United States and Cuba will depend on real progress toward these and the other goals, many of which I've described. When Cuba is ready to take concrete steps to these ends, we will be ready, willing, and able to come to the table to negotiate that much better deal for Cubans, for Americans, much better deal. And a deal that's fair. A deal that's fair. And a deal that makes sense. Our embassy remains open in the hope that our countries can forge a much stronger and better path. America believes that free, independent, and sovereign nations are the best vehicle for human happiness, for health, for education, for safety, for everything. We all accept that all nations have the right to chart their own paths, and I'm certainly a very big believer in that. So we will respect Cuban sovereignty, but we will never turn our backs on the Cuban people. That will not happen. Over the years, a special sympathy has grown between this land of the free and the beautiful people of that island so close to our shores and so deeply woven into the history of our region. America has rejected the Cuban people's oppressors. They are rejected. Officially today, they are rejected. And to those people, America has become a source of strength and our flag a symbol of hope. I know that is exactly what America is to you and what it represents to you. It represents the same to me. It represents the same to all of us. And that is what it was to a little boy, Luis Aza. You ever hear of Luis? Became very famous, great talent. Just 8 years old when Fidel Castro seized power. At the time, Luis's father was the police chief in Santiago de Cuba. You know Santiago? Yeah? Oh, they know Santiago. Just days after Fidel took control, his father was one of 71 Cubans executed by firing squad near San Juan Hill at the hands of the Castro regime. Luis buried his grief in his great love of music. He began playing the violin so brilliantly and so beautifully. Soon the regime saw his incredible gift and wanted to use him for propaganda purposes. When he was 12, they organized a national television special and demanded he play a solo for Raul Castro, who, by the way, is leaving now. I wonder why. They sent an official to fetch Luis from his home, but Luis refused to go. And a few days later, Castro's soldiers barged into his orchestra practice area, guns blazing. They told him to play for them. Terrified, Luis began to play, and the entire room was stunned by what they heard. Ringing out from the trembling boy's violin was a tune they all recognized. This young Cuban boy was playing the Star-Spangled Banner. Luis played the American national anthem all the way through. And when he finished, the room was dead silent. When we say that America stands as a symbol to the world, a symbol of freedom, and a symbol of hope, that is what Luis meant, and that is what Luis displayed that day. It was a big day. It was a great day. And that is what we will all remain. That was a very important moment, just like this is now for Cuba, a very important moment. America will always stand for liberty, and America will always pray and cheer for the freedom of the Cuban people. Now, that little boy whose story I just told you, the one who played that violin so beautifully so many years ago, is here with us today in our very, very packed and extremely warm auditorium. Of course, he is no longer a little boy, but a world-renowned violinist and conductor, one of the greats. And today he will once again play his violin and fill the hearts of all who love and cherish Cuba, the United States, and freedom. I would like now to invite Luis to the stage. Luis. Thank you, Luis. I just said, so where were you more nervous, today or then? He said, honestly, I think today. That's pretty. Thank you, Luis. That was beautiful. So I want to thank Miami. I want to thank Little Havana. Ah, Havana we love. Do we love it? Would you move anywhere else? You wouldn't move to Palm Beach, would you? No. No way. Little Havana. And I want to thank all of our great friends here today. You've been amazing, loyal, beautiful people. And thank you. Don't remind me. Actually, I was telling Mike. So it was 2 days on my birthday till a big day, which turned out to be tomorrow, the 16th. That was the day I came down with Melania on the escalator at Trump Tower. That's tomorrow. So it's exactly tomorrow, 2 years since we announced. And it worked out okay. Worked out okay. It's a great honor. Believe me, it's a great honor, right? Thank you. Thank you very much. I just want to end by saying, may God bless everyone searching for freedom. May God bless Cuba. May God bless the United States of America. And God bless you all. Thank you. Now I'm going to sign. Thank you. So this says, strengthening the policy of the United States toward Cuba. And I can add, strengthening a lot. So this is very important, and you watch what's going to happen. It's going to be a great day for Cuba. Thank you. Thank you very much. Where's Mario? Here, sir. Mario. Who's our third one?
Right here behind you, Mr. President.
Oh, absolutely.
Responding to the president, Democratic Senator Mark Warner of Virginia tweeted, "The Trump administration's decision to reverse progress in U.S.-Cuba relations sends the wrong message to the world about American leadership." Republican Congressman Tom Emmer of Minnesota writes, "With today's Cuba directive, President Trump would appear to be in violation of his #1 campaign promise to keep Americans and our homeland safe." And Maine Democrat Shelley Pingree posted this message: "American travel has brought income to Cubans, mutually beneficial economic opportunities, and cultural exchange. It's ridiculous to go backward."